No sound reached Lena's ears except the dire hissing of oxygen escaping her damaged shelter and the thunderous roar of the crimson storm battering the outside walls. In the remote gloom of Jindara Moon, she, a Vireen researcher, awaited a rescue that seemed too impossible to come. The Vireen had shunned alliances for generations, wrapping themselves in isolationist beliefs, convinced that they needed no contact, nor mercy, nor reliance on outsiders. And above all, never on humans, those restless wanderers of the galaxy who, as legends whispered, once sought to conquer. Lena could only tremble as the protective hull around her small campsite groaned. The wind battered its surface with unrelenting force, and the once sturdy plating threatened to give way. The swirling dust outside glowed a muted red, and in the intermittent flickers of lightning, Lena could see how the saturated air roiled with energy. Everything around her told of certain doom if she stepped out. Her oxygen supply had minutes left, 10 or maybe 9, by the last gauge reading. She blinked, forcing herself not to cry. Tears only wasted more of her precious air. She cursed her misfortune, reflecting on what led her to explore this desolate place. She was part of an expedition, 3 researchers and 2 pilots, all chosen for a deep space study of ancient Vireen migration patterns. Jindara Moon was believed to have once served as a stepping stone for explorers who traveled beyond the known star routes. For decades, scientists had argued about whether the old, half-buried structures beneath Jindara's crust bore evidence of an extinct race, or if they'd been left behind by an advanced civilization whose identity was lost to time. At the expedition's onset, no one had expected storms of such ferocity. Jindara's climate had always been rumored to shift drastically, but the severity of this particular tempest exceeded even the direst projections. Out of pride, or perhaps hubris, her Vireen colleagues had insisted on forging ahead, certain they could handle any atmospheric disturbance. They had, however, erred in their haste. In one horrifying flash, an unrelenting gust tore their main research station to pieces, scattering equipment and leaving the team in disarray. Even their secondary vessel was lost to the swirling red gloom. Lena was flung from her group, stumbling blindly into a battered emergency pod. As luck would have it, the shelter walls endured for some hours, but the storm refused to abate. With each passing minute, the integrity of her temporary haven diminished. She knelt now beside the meager console that blinked its final warnings. Oxygen levels critically low, it read, and the interior temperature threatened to plummet. Lena's breath caught in her throat, as if refusing to fully inflate her lungs, for fear that it would take more from the supply than absolutely necessary. "Is anyone there?" she whispered into her transmitter, though the lines crackled with static. "Please, there must be someone receiving this. My life signs are failing. I don't have much longer." It had been 6 hours since she last heard a voice, a distant, garbled transmission that might have been from her Vireen team. Or perhaps it was someone else, someone passing by the moon's orbit. She only heard a faint echo. "We see your coordinates, preparing," then it had cut out. The old teachings hovered at the edges of her thoughts. Humans were opportunists, travelers who once threatened the galaxy with unstoppable expansion. The lore said that they had conquered entire worlds, even if most had since retreated to their own star systems. The worst among the Vireen believed that if any humans were around, they would come only to seize new resources or enslave. Thus, Lena had grown up steeled against the notion of ever meeting a human. Their kind was something to be avoided. You never wanted to rely on them. But as her eyes closed in despair, she silently pleaded, "Let it be anyone, even a human. Just let them help me." She felt a shudder run through the hall. A creaking noise, far too loud, made her press herself against the floor. Her console sparked as the power flickered, and in the flickering light, she thought she saw a dark shape moving beyond the small window in the shelter's hatch. Another violent gust of wind rattled the entire structure. Lena struggled to her feet, heart hammering in her chest, fearing the next crack in the walls would be her end. Another shape flickered past. Then she heard a metallic clang, as if something was attaching to her hatch. She waited, each second stretching into an eternity. Suddenly, the airlock hissed. A wave of red dust swirled in as the manual override parted the hatch door. Her environment gauge bleeped in protest. The swirling storm air outside was lethal, loaded with enough particulate matter to shred flesh in minutes. Lena retreated, bracing for the worst. A silhouette emerged through the swirling chaos, stepping inside with heavy boots. She glimpsed a tall figure encased in an exosuit, the visor tinted black, the limbs protected by thick plating. It was not a Vireen design. In that split second, she understood, a human. The figure was undeniably human. He raised a hand in a gesture that seemed universal enough, a sign of peace, an attempt to convey calm. Then, with careful motion, he keyed in a command on his wrist console, sealing the hatch behind him, blocking out the storm. The interior lights brightened for a moment, and the battered sensor array blinked to life. She clung to the wall, her eyes locked on this human, her heart pounding from a blend of fear and fragile hope. His voice, distorted at first by the suit's comms, resonated in the small space. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm here to help. I'm Captain Jason Carter, from Earth's Interstellar Rescue Service. Are you alone?" "Alone?" She almost laughed, but no breath came for such a frivolity. She nodded instead. She could see the bright glow of the oxygen gauge on his suit, the faint hum of a small portable life support system strapped to his back. It was the technology she had been taught to regard with both admiration and dread. The humans, with their advanced exosuits, had roamed the stars searching for worlds to conquer. And yet, here one stood, offering her salvation. She managed, her voice trembling. "I am Lena. Vireen expedition, shelter compromised, oxygen." His gloved hands moved quickly. He unslung a small device from his belt, attaching it to the battered interior wall. "Try not to speak too much," he advised. "Your oxygen levels are too low. This portable canister should help stabilize the atmosphere in here for a little while, but we need to get going. The storm's only getting worse." He triggered the device, and Lena heard the blessed hiss of fresh oxygen pumping into the air. She closed her eyes, letting each breath fill her lungs. Her body felt shaky, her limbs heavy with near exhaustion. She opened her eyes to see him bending down, adjusting a sensor that beeped ominously. "I've only got a brief window to get us out," he said. "My own ship is waiting above, but the turbulence is too heavy to maintain a safe hover. We'll have to move fast to the extraction point. Can you walk?" Lena's first instinct was to recoil. Yet, she recognized she had no choice. If she remained, she would die within minutes. If she placed her trust in this unknown human, she might survive. She nodded, pushing off the wall to stand. Her legs wobbled. He caught her by the arm, steadying her in a firm but gentle grip. "Lean on me," he said. "I'll guide you." Though the words were oddly comforting, a wave of alarm shot through her. Could she allow a human to lead her? Everything in her upbringing, every cautionary tale whispered by her elders, told her of unscrupulous invaders who lured unsuspecting Vireen to their doom. But the fear of dying alone in that battered shelter overshadowed any xenophobic caution. Holding her breath, she let him help her into a spare exosuit from his pack. It was bulkier than she was used to, but it sealed around her form. A pressurized hiss followed as the visor enclosed her face. Jason flicked on his suit's external comm again. "We have to use a tether," he told her. "The storm will throw us around like rag dolls." As soon as they stepped out into the inferno, she understood the gravity of his warning. The swirling red winds tore at them, and the pelting sand-like particles made even the thick armor tremble. He attached a line from his belt to hers, and with each step, they fought to remain upright. She watched in awe as Jason led her across the dust-ridden terrain. The swirling gloom glowed, lit occasionally by jagged forks of red lightning that sizzled overhead. They trudged onward for minutes that felt like hours. The world was reduced to howling wind and the comforting tautness of the tether between them. Suddenly, a brilliant flash lit up the landscape, and Lena glimpsed the silhouette of what might have been an ancient structure, dark spires rising from the ground, partially buried beneath dust and debris. Then they vanished into the swirling haze again. Through the suit speakers, she heard Jason grunt. He paused, consulting a handheld device. She suspected he was using some human version of a NAV system. "The extraction point is still half a kilometer away," he said, "but it's not good out there. My team can't land with the storm raging like this." She heard the exhaustion creeping into his voice. A part of her admired the resilience it must have taken for him to get this far. risking his own life to save a stranger from a species that, historically, did not trust his own. Despite the swirling chaos, or perhaps because of it, she reached out, grabbing his shoulder to steady herself. He turned. She saw his visor tilt, and though she couldn't see his eyes, she felt him reading her gratitude. The wind howled anew, hurling debris. One chunk of twisted metal slammed into them, forcing them to the ground. Lena's shoulder ached, but Jason shielded her with his body, taking the brunt of the impact. For a moment, she feared his suit would rip, exposing him to the lethal storm. But the exo-armor held strong. When the worst of that gust subsided, he pushed the debris aside, urging her forward. "We can't stay here," he said, voice strained. "We'll find cover in those ruins up ahead. I saw an entrance, or at least what looked like one." She nodded, both terrified and awed. The Vireen researchers had come here to investigate rumored ancient complexes beneath Jindara's crust. Now, it seemed fate was guiding them into the depths of what had been discovered decades ago, but never fully explored. With great effort, they made their way to a shattered archway half buried in crimson dust. The structure loomed, the doorway twisted with age. Jason used an energy cutter from his belt to clear enough debris to crawl inside. Once they passed through, the interior was eerily still, the howling wind muffled by massive stone walls. Lena sank to her knees, heart pounding. She stared at the smooth interior corridors, the surfaces etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the gloom. Jason's suit lights swept across the walls, revealing writing that Lena recognized not as purely Vireen, but something older. Her breath caught in her throat. "This is ancient. It looks like my people's ancestral script," she said, her voice thin in the comm channel. "But the form is different, more primitive." Jason hovered near her, studying the inscriptions. "We have to move deeper," he said softly. "Find a safer chamber to wait out the storm. My rescue shuttle can't pierce this storm yet, but if I can maintain contact with them, we'll get out of here when it calms. Let's see if we can find a sealed area or some power source." They pressed onward, the corridor leading to a labyrinth of rooms. The environment inside was surprisingly stable. The architecture seemed designed to endure intense conditions, as if those who built it had known that Jindara's weather could grow violent over centuries. The dust on the floor was thick, but as they stepped carefully, they discovered a large chamber whose doors were sealed with an electronic lock. Energy still coursed through old conduits, humming with an otherworldly throb. Jason frowned, scanning the lock's panel with a device from his belt. "This is advanced," he muttered. "But the design doesn't match typical Vireen systems. It's reminiscent of some older Terran designs, too, though that's improbable. Unless..." Lena blinked inside her visor, unsure she'd heard him correctly. "Terran designs?" she repeated. "As in from Earth. But that would be impossible. My people have no record of such things. Humans never settled on Jindara Moon, or so we believed. They were rumored to roam widely, but never anywhere near here." He shrugged. "The galaxy is large, and stories are often incomplete." He turned back to the lock, pressing a few more keys. "Maybe we can puzzle out a way in. If there's an intact environment inside, it could be safer than continuing to rely on portable oxygen." With a hiss, the lock clicked. The door slid open, revealing a surprisingly intact control room. Lights, though dim, flickered overhead. The air inside was stale but appeared breathable if the facility's ancient ventilation could be rebooted. Panels along the walls displayed unreadable script, a mix of swirling Vireen characters, random symbols Lena didn't recognize, and what Jason swore looked like archaic Terran runes. Cautiously, they stepped inside. Jason sealed the door behind them to keep the storm's dust at bay. Lena found what seemed to be a control console near the center of the chamber. When she touched it, a hum resounded throughout the walls, as if the entire place had been woken from a long slumber. A shaky exhale escaped her lips. "What is this place?" she whispered. "It's beyond what any of our archaeologists have found on Jindara. If it's truly older than the modern era, it might predate the earliest Vireen expansions into these star systems." Jason helped her remove the helmet of her exosuit. The console's sensors indicated the chamber's air was marginally stable, thin, but free of the lethal particulates from outside. "We can rest here," he said gently. "Let me check the power grid. Maybe I can channel more oxygen into the room." She nodded, stepping aside. In the dim light, She studied him for the first time without the tinted visor. He appeared young, with short, dark hair that framed a strong face. His gaze shifted between the ancient technology and her, a mixture of focus and concern. She felt an unsettling mix of gratitude and confusion. She had, indeed, been raised to suspect humans, to see them as cunning or ruthless. And yet, here was a human who had risked everything to rescue her, a stranger. Her heart beat faster, and it wasn't just from fear anymore. At that moment, a soft beep echoed from Jason's wrist. Calm, he lifted it, tapping a button. "Carter here," he said, voice tight with hope. A crackling voice answered, too garbled to understand. He frowned. "I'm inside some sort of structure. Signal's poor. There's no safe LZ anywhere near. Storm is intensifying." He paused, listening. "Understood. I'll look for a stable pocket or hope the storm dies soon. Stand by for further instructions." He ended the transmission, turning back to Lena. "My pilot can't land yet," he explained. "We may be here a while." She offered a faint nod, one hand drifting across the etched walls. "Better in here than out in that storm. This place, maybe we can learn something, at least." Our expedition was meant to search for evidence of ancient Vireen presence. I never expected to find something this advanced. He knelt beside a console, fiddling with wires and battered circuits. The gloom in the chamber made his figure look like a ghostly sentinel, flickering in and out of Lena's vision. After several moments of careful tinkering, a soft whir began in the walls. Stale air drifted from vents in the ceiling. Jason gave a small, triumphant smile. "That should help with the oxygen," he said. Grateful, Lena sank down onto a small ledge, removing the rest of the exosuit with care. The air felt heavy, still laced with the dryness of centuries. She breathed in slow, shallow sips. "Thank you," she said at last, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "My people have taught me to fear humans. Yet, you came to rescue me. Why?" Jason hesitated, setting aside his tools. "I'm part of an interstellar rescue unit," he said. "My job is to save those in peril, no matter what species. Not all humans are conquerors. Not all of us thirst for domination. That's mostly old history, from a time of colonial expansion centuries ago. We've learned a lot since then, but some species still fear us. I guess your people do." She lowered her eyes. "We heard the stories passed down through generations. Planets subjugated, resources stripped. Tales of conflict. I never questioned them. And here you are, saving me at your own risk." He exhaled, softening his voice. "Well, maybe we can start rewriting the stories." In that moment, a flicker rippled across the walls, like a projection activating. Both turned in surprise. Along one smooth wall, a shimmering image came to life. A sequence of symbols and faint silhouettes, as though a recording from eons past was struggling to replay. Lena and Jason rose, transfixed. The silhouettes depicted tall figures that looked vaguely Vireen, slender, with ridged forearms and elongated necks, but also decidedly different. Then the images shifted, showing another set of figures, human in form, standing side by side with them, forging something that looked like an alliance. More scenes flashed, building a city, sharing knowledge, erecting monuments. Jason sucked in a breath. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked quietly. "Humans and Vireen, working together, side by side?" Lena couldn't speak. She watched the images with rapt astonishment. If these were genuine recordings from an ancient civilization, it meant her ancestors had once cooperated with humans on some grand project. But the next images were darker. Warships in orbit, battles on planetary surfaces, destruction rolling across the land. The illusions flitted too fast to fully decipher, but the sense of conflict was apparent. Then the images dimmed and dissolved, leaving only faint lines of text on the wall. Lena stepped forward, her hand trembling. "It looks like they built something here," she murmured. "Then a schism or a war happened. Could it be that the ruthless humans we learned to fear were actually just one side of a complex conflict? Maybe our own ancestors were not entirely innocent, either." Jason's eyes flickered to hers. "We humans have had many internal conflicts, and not all our ancestors' actions were noble. It's possible this moon was a collaborative outpost that was abandoned or destroyed in a war. The question is, why has none of this been preserved in your official histories? Or in ours, for that matter?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure. She felt her mind whirl, as if centuries of prejudice were unraveling in her head. "This changes everything," she whispered. A sudden crackle on Jason's comm unit broke the silence. He raised his wrist to his ear. A distorted voice came through. "Storm, receding, window in 30 minutes, stand by." Relief flooded Jason's face. "We might get out of here," he said, turning to Lena. "But what do we do about this place?" This knowledge. She squared her shoulders, surprised at her own determination. "We have to bring it to light. My people think humans are the ruthless ones, while humans might see us as untrusting or unwilling to cooperate. If we can show them this shared history, maybe it'll open a path for reconciliation. We've lived with these fears for so long." Jason nodded. "Agreed. Let's gather what we can. We'll document the inscriptions, record the evidence. My team can share it with the Interstellar Council. If we handle this carefully, it might spark a new era of collaboration. I just hope your people will listen." Lena managed a small smile, an expression of hope flickering across her tired features. "I'll make them listen," she said, voice raw but resolute. For the next several minutes, they searched the chamber for recording devices or data modules. In the corners, they found sealed crates, corroded by time, still bearing insignias that combined Vireen writing and an unknown crest that resembled Earth's earliest space programs. Jason took scans of everything, while Lena carefully extracted anything that looked physically intact. All the while, the thunderous storm outside began to wane. Through occasional breaks in the dusty gloom, faint rays of starlight peeked in through cracks in the ancient structure. Lena's heart pounded, not only from the rush of discovery, but from the closeness of the man who was guiding her. The prejudice that once dominated her mind wavered, replaced by a swirling confusion of gratitude, admiration, and an unspoken flutter of something deeper. She forced herself to focus on the immediate tasks. Now was not the time for such distracting feelings. Or perhaps it was exactly the time, because who could say how many moments they might have left? At last, Jason signaled her. "They're calling me back," he said. "We can try for an extraction in 15 minutes, once the ship finds a stable corridor through the atmosphere. But we have to head outside to a safer clearing." A jolt of anxiety coursed through Lena. "But the storm," he checked the readouts. "It's weakened enough for us to manage a short trek. Still dangerous, but not as lethal as before. Let's hope it continues to drop." They sealed up the compartments they had opened, taking small data modules with them. Jason reactivated the exosuits for both of them, ensuring the oxygen reserves were adequate for the journey. When they stepped out into the corridor again, the swirling dust had receded to a more subdued haze. They navigated through the labyrinth and emerged through the archway. Though the wind still whipped, it lacked the savage intensity of before. "We'll head north," Jason directed, checking his handheld device. "My pilot's dropping a beacon near the remains of your expedition base. If we can get there, the shuttle can touch down for a few seconds." Once again, Lena felt the tether clipped to her harness. She held onto Jason's arm. This time, the fear was less. She felt more certain, more trusting of him. As they struggled forward, she found her thoughts drifting. She marveled at the swirling red clouds overhead, how they parted in ragged intervals, revealing a sky of dark violet. She felt a surreal calm, as though the moon itself acknowledged that some new course was being charted here, a quiet alliance in the midst of chaos. They encountered debris from the shattered research station. Torn metal, shards of collapsed towers, crates of supplies scattered across the dusty plain. Lena caught a glimpse of her lost colleagues' living modules, hopelessly ruined. There were no signs of survivors, no movement, only the echo of tragedy. She swallowed back tears, letting Jason lead her onward. Finally, in the distance, she spotted a faint blinking light, a beacon slicing through the haze. The ground trembled under the last vestiges of the storm, but they pressed on. Closer and closer they came, until suddenly a silhouette emerged from the gloom, an angular rescue craft, thrusters flaring, fighting the wind. The craft lowered, landing struts unfolding with careful precision. Jason hurried, pulling Lena with him to the open hatch. A gust nearly knocked them aside, but the pilot's skillful maneuvering allowed them enough time to climb aboard. The hatch sealed, shutting out the swirling red dust. Inside, the craft's cabin lights were bright, humming with power. Lena collapsed into a seat, exhaustion overwhelming her. Jason removed his helmet and shook out his sweat-drenched hair. The pilot, a stern-faced woman with a quickly moving hand on the controls, shot him a triumphant grin. "Nice work," she said, voice crackling through the ship's internal comms. Then she looked at Lena with curiosity, nodding in greeting. "I'm Lieutenant Gao, Earth Rescue. Good to have you aboard, Vireen." Lena offered a shaky smile, just as Jason turned to help strap her in. The engines roared, and the craft lifted off, forging a path through the turbulent sky. Lena's stomach lurched at the intense motion, but relief soon replaced her nausea. She was safe, truly safe. Within minutes, they emerged above the storm-racked moon, the blackness of space stretching into infinity. Stars twinkled beyond the battered hull, an endless tapestry that reminded Lena of the grand mysteries that still awaited them. She let out a trembling sigh, every muscle in her body uncoiling. Jason knelt beside her seat. "We'll take you back to our base. I can't promise everything will be easy from here on out, but you're alive. That's what counts." She reached for his hand before she could second-guess herself. He stiffened slightly, perhaps shocked by her gesture, then laced his fingers gently with hers, a silent affirmation of trust. For a moment, no words were exchanged, but the shared warmth was enough. Days turned into weeks as Lena recovered aboard the Earth Rescue outpost stationed on a nearby orbital platform. News of her survival filtered back to the Vireen authorities, but they remained wary. Some of her own people demanded her immediate return, refusing the idea of her being indebted to a human. And yet, others were enthralled by the data she brought back. The mysterious facility, the hidden inscriptions, the undeniable suggestion that once, in the mists of the past, Vireen and humans had collaborated in peace. Jason made sure that she was cared for, personally overseeing her acclimation in the outpost's med bay. Though the staff were mostly human, she was surprised by their kindness. They brought her nourishing meals, asked about her comfort, encouraged her to rest. A far cry from the fearsome image she'd carried in her mind. One evening, after the medical staff declared Lena fit to walk around, Jason led her on a tour of the outpost. It was a series of interconnected modules, each containing advanced labs, living quarters, and observation decks. More than once, Lena saw the stares of curious humans, their gazes flicking with open curiosity rather than hostility. She tried to stand tall, reminding herself that she, too, was studying them. At length, they arrived at a small observation bubble near the station's rim. A wide window opened to a panorama of the stars, the swirl of the gas giant that Jindara orbited, and the battered moon itself, still shrouded in the tail end of the crimson storm. The swirling red mass was mesmerizing from above, equal parts beautiful and terrifying. Jason cleared his throat. "We're analyzing the data you collected," he said. "We've transmitted some preliminary findings to Earth and to your government as well. The Council wants a joint expedition to fully excavate that facility. If it proves that our species once cooperated at a high level, it could reshape our future relations." She lowered her eyes, hesitating. "And my people?" she asked, voice trembling. "Will they be open to that?" A wry smile touched his lips. "I think it will take time. Many Vireen remain convinced that humans are untrustworthy. And many humans don't really know the Vireen at all, beyond rumors. But you, Lena, you've become somewhat of a symbol already. The rescued scholar who walked hand in hand with a human pilot out of the deadliest storm in living memory. People will listen to your testimony." She swallowed, heart pounding. "Then I must speak," she said, not quite able to keep the fear from her voice. "For centuries, we believed you were ruthless conquerors. I'm finding that rumor may have been an oversimplification or based on an ancient conflict that neither side fully remembers. I don't know if the new generation of Vireen are ready to accept that we share a deeper history." Jason took a step closer. Their gazes locked, the starfield behind him setting his figure in faint silhouette. He placed a gentle hand on her arm. "If you speak truth, if you share your experiences, maybe hearts will change," he said quietly. I'm willing to help any way I can. But the final choice will be yours." Her thoughts tangled. She wanted to prove that her people could overcome their fears, that they could build a partnership with humanity based on the new evidence. But she also felt an even more personal stirring, one that had been growing since the moment he saved her life in that battered shelter. She did not quite have words for it, only a tumult of emotions. A sense that her fate and his were inextricably linked now. "We have a lot to do," she murmured, turning to gaze at the swirling red moon below. "But I can't help thinking, if we truly were allies once, maybe we can be again." Jason nodded softly. For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the storm fade on Jindara's horizon, each lost in their own swirl of thoughts. The diplomatic process began with tension. The Vireen Council demanded Lena return to the homeworld for debriefing, suspicious that she might have been coerced or manipulated by the humans. She agreed, on the condition that she be allowed to bring Jason and a small portion of the discovered artifacts as proof of what she'd found. After much debate, an accord was reached, and a date set for a carefully managed arrival of the Earth delegation on Vireen territory. Days later, Jason piloted a sleek Earth shuttle through the shimmering atmosphere of Virina Prime, the majestic capital planet of the Vireen. Lena sat behind him, nerves taut, unsure of the reception that awaited them. Virina Prime unfolded below them in rolling teal forests, crystalline lakes, and tall spires marking Vireen cities. The vantage was breathtaking, even for Lena, who had grown up among these landscapes. She wondered how Jason saw it. Did he sense the years of mistrust coursing through the swirling clouds? Or did he only see the beauty? They landed on a designated pad near the council's Hall of Elders. The structure was grand, made of gleaming organic materials that curved upward in elegant arcs. Armed Vireen officials waited, faces unreadable. Jason and Lena stepped onto the platform together, the hush of the crowd palpable. She forced herself to walk with confidence, aware of how many eyes watched, how many minds whispered. A million questions and suspicions hovered in the air. She spotted a few of her old colleagues from the expedition, those who had survived or never made it to Jindara. Relief warred with trepidation as she recognized them. Did they blame her for the mission's failure? Did they resent that she had been saved by a human? Still, they all parted as the council members approached. The chief counselor, Vireen, was a tall Vireen with silver ridges crowning his brow. He scrutinized Jason from top to bottom, then turned to Lena. "We greet you, Lena of the Jindara mission," he said, voice tinged with formal courtesy. "And we greet your companion." He paused on the last word. Jason dipped his head respectfully. "Captain Jason Carter of Earth, thank you for allowing me this audience." Counselor Vireen inclined his head, though the gesture was stiff. "Your arrival has stirred great debate. We have heard that you, a human, rescued our citizen, and that the two of you discovered a structure of uncertain origin. That is all we have been told so far." Lena took a breath, stepping forward. "We have more than that, Counselor," she said. "We have data modules, recordings from an ancient facility on Jindara Moon. They show a time when Vireen and humans, perhaps the earliest starfarers of both species, worked together. And then, something tore them apart, leading to war. Our people have forgotten the truth over centuries. We cling to old resentments against humans because we believe them the aggressors. But the evidence suggests a more complex story, one that might exonerate them and challenge our own role." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled Vireen. Counselor Vireen's eyes narrowed, though not entirely with hostility. "That is a significant claim," he said. "We shall study your evidence, but you must understand that centuries of teaching cannot be overturned lightly. Even if these data modules are genuine, we must proceed with caution." Jason nodded, stepping forward to offer a small container. "This holds the scans we took. We ask only that you verify their authenticity and that we continue dialogue. We want peace, cooperation, not conquest." The counselor pursed his lips. "We shall see," he said carefully. "For now, your arrival is sanctioned. You will both remain under observation while we conduct our analysis. In time, we will convene a full assembly to discuss the findings." Lena bowed her head. "Thank you, Counselor." Jason followed suit. The meeting ended, leaving Lena and Jason free to move within a controlled section of the city, though under close watch. Tension clung to them like a heavy cloak, but they found a small suite prepared for them, a sign that not all were opposed to giving them a fair hearing. Over the next few days, the council employed an array of experts to validate the authenticity of the data modules. Jason's copies of the ancient inscriptions were compared with known historical records, and Vireen archaeologists debated whether the structural designs on Jindara matched the earliest known patterns of Vireen architecture. The presence of what looked like archaic Terran script baffled them. Meanwhile, news spread. The common citizens began hearing rumors that a lost city on Jindara moon contained evidence the humans were not always the villains. Whispers of curiosity, hope, and even anger surfaced in every corner. One evening, after a long day of cross-examinations, Lena found herself alone in the courtyard of the guest complex. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tall, spindly trees that glowed faintly under the planet's twin moons. She leaned against a railing, letting the swirl of fragrance and the quiet hum of the nocturnal creatures soothe her. Footsteps approached. She glanced back to see Jason, who had shed his flight suit for simple civilian attire. She offered a small, tired smile. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not much. Thought I'd get some air," he replied, moving to stand beside her. They gazed at the star-studded sky, the faint lines of passing ships overhead, a testament to Vireen Prime's advanced civilization. "This place is beautiful," Jason said after a moment, voice low. "I can see why your people want to protect it from outside influences." She exhaled. "I just never expected to be the one who'd bring so many outside influences here," she murmured. "I feel torn. Some part of me wonders if we're opening a wound rather than healing it." Jason's gaze fell on her. "You're worried about how your people will react if the records show blame on both sides?" She nodded. "Yes. We Vireen have always prided ourselves on moral superiority. We believed the humans were the aggressors, and we were the innocent victims. If it turns out our ancestors also had a hand in the conflict, what does that say about us?" A faint, understanding smile tugged at Jason's lips. "It says you're like us, flawed, complicated, capable of good and evil. Maybe that's why it's time to mend the rift. We share more than either side wants to admit." She bowed her head. When she looked at him again, she felt a tingling warmth, a silent bond. "Jason, I must thank you again," she said, voice trembling. "You saved my life, but more than that, you've given me the courage to face truths I never thought I'd confront." The faint glow of the twin moons illuminated his face. "If saving you was all I did," he murmured, "I'd count it enough of a life's accomplishment. But I think, together, we're saving a lot more than just one life." She realized how close they stood, the hush of the night wrapping them in an intimate cocoon. The distance between them felt electric. Suddenly, old doubts mingled with a new, overwhelming sense of closeness. She parted her lips, trying to find words, but her breath caught. Then, quietly, Jason leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers, a tender gesture from one world to another, bridging space and centuries of mistrust. They stood like that, hearts beating in quiet unison, for an eternal moment. A spark, an unspoken promise, kindled between them. Even if the path ahead was fraught with controversy, that instant was theirs. Lena let her eyes drift shut, a silent vow forming in her mind. She would stand with him. She would stand for a future where their peoples might, at last, embrace both the truth and each other. The full assembly convened a week later, in a great domed hall of shimmering alabaster. Rows of Vireen officials, historians, and citizen representatives gathered in tiered seating around a central dais. The mood was tense, the hush nearly tangible. At the center stood Lena, trembling with a determined fervor. Counselor Rezarin presided, flanked by other counselors in ceremonial attire. Jason waited nearby, expression sober, holding an encrypted data drive that contained the final analysis of the Jindara findings. Rezarin's voice rang out. "We gather today to address the claims that our ancestors once cooperated with humans, and that the historical conflict we believed was entirely caused by Terran aggression may have been more complex. Research from the Jindara site has been verified by an international team of archaeologists, xenologists, and data analysts. Lena, if you would." Lena stepped forward, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Honored Council, my esteemed compatriots, I stand here not to condemn our traditions, but to expand them with truth. The artifacts we retrieved from Jindara's buried facility date back approximately 6 centuries. They indicate a joint settlement, a combined effort between Vireen explorers and human pioneers. For reasons that remain only partially documented, a war erupted, leading both sides to condemn each other. The humans retreated toward their home territories, while our people closed our borders, swearing never again to trust outsiders. Over time, we turned these events into legends of ruthless human conquerors. Her voice tightened, but the data shows that blame cannot rest solely with them. Logs reference a breakdown of diplomacy, infiltration, possibly sabotage on both sides. Whatever truly happened, it ended that once promising alliance. The architecture, inscriptions, and shared technologies speak volumes, even though much was destroyed. I ask you all to consider this evidence carefully. Judge not with fear, but with fairness. Rezaren nodded and turned to a panel of historians, who each provided their confirmation of the authenticity of the scans. The final historian, an elderly Vireen with drooping ridges, concluded, "We find no evidence of tampering or forgery. If these records are accurate, it upends our standard narrative." A subdued hush fell across the assembly. Some council members exchanged uneasy glances. A wave of murmuring passed through the spectators. At last, Councillor Rezaren spoke again, voice measured. "This is a difficult truth for us. Still, the evidence is compelling. We must decide how to proceed. Our laws once forbade direct alliances with humankind, for fear of subjugation. But we now see that our fear may have been based, in part, on misinformation." He glanced at Jason, who stood tall, calm under scrutiny. "Captain Carter," the counselor said, "you represent a new generation of humans. Do you swear your people wish for peace, that you do not come to our world with hidden ambitions?" Jason inclined his head. "I swear it, counselor. My mission, and that of our rescue service, is to protect life. We have no desire to conquer, only to cooperate and learn. I can't speak for every human across every star system, but Earth's official stance is one of peaceful collaboration. We'd like to see old wounds healed." The tension in the hall hung like a heavy drape, until Councillor Rezaren turned to the assembly. "In light of these revelations, I propose we open formal talks with Earth, not as a subjugated world nor a subordinate ally, but as equals. Let us see if we can shape a future that is founded on truth and mutual respect." Shall the council vote? One by one, hands lifted, some with hesitation, some with genuine zeal. A few scowled, refraining. Still, the majority rose in favor. Applause, tentative at first, began to ripple through the hall. Lena felt tears well up. She turned to Jason, who allowed himself a small, relieved smile. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. They had done it. The door, once sealed by centuries of fear, was now unlocked. The weeks and months that followed were a whirlwind of new treaties, cultural exchanges, and collaborative research expeditions to Jindara Moon. Vireen scientists and human archaeologists worked side by side, unearthing more records from the buried facility. Each new discovery carried a dual effect. It reaffirmed the ancient bond and forced both species to confront how centuries of misinformation had shaped them. Lena was at the heart of these exchanges, her expertise on Vireen history and her newly broadened perspective invaluable. She shared her knowledge tirelessly, forging friendships not just among her own people, but among humans who visited. Jason, often assigned as a liaison, became her constant partner in coordinating rescue drills, environmental surveys, and even joint celebrations meant to honor both cultures. In the process, they grew closer, forging a bond that transcended the initial debt of life-saving gratitude. Whenever they roamed the corridors of the once-ruined facility on Jindara, scanning ancient walls with new technology, they felt the echoes of those who had come before. They read the inscriptions, the records of both triumph and downfall, and sometimes exchanged a wistful look, wondering if their ancestors had walked these halls, arms linked in a moment of friendship that had ended far too soon. One day, as they oversaw a combined engineering team restoring power to a secondary chamber, a hidden doorway slid open unexpectedly. A swirl of stale air rushed out, and inside, they discovered what looked like living quarters. Among dusty remains of old furniture, tapestries, and personal effects, they stumbled upon a small locket, half buried in debris. Gently, Lena picked it up, brushing away centuries of dust. The locket contained a faded image, half worn away, but it clearly displayed two figures, one distinctly Vireen, the other undoubtedly human. Their arms were around each other's shoulders, smiles bright with hope. Jason knelt beside her. "Another piece of the puzzle," he said softly. She cradled the locket in her palm. They were more than colleagues, she guessed, heart stirring with an inexplicable rush. Perhaps they were dear friends. Maybe they shared a bond like ours. He took her free hand. "Let's make sure that bond isn't forgotten this time." She inhaled, meeting his gaze. Hope, tempered by the sorrow of the past, welled within her. "Never again," she whispered. On the day of the grand unveiling, a year after Lena's rescue from the Crimson Storm, a ceremony took place on Jindara Moon. Together, the Vireen Council and representatives from Earth dedicated a monument to the newly rediscovered alliance. The storm had finally relented, leaving the moon's dusty plains eerily quiet under a pale sun. Hundreds gathered, from scientists to dignitaries, from security officers to curious citizens. They stood outside the ancient facility's main entrance, which now had a stabilized climate dome overhead. Newly erected scaffolding formed a safe perimeter, while the polished, engraved monument rose at the center of the plaza. It depicted two figures, a stylized Vireen and a human, reaching out to clasp hands. The inscription, rendered in both languages, read, "United by truth, we stand as one." Lena and Jason stood side by side, faces aglow with pride and humility, as Counselor Vireen and an Earth ambassador gave speeches. Applause rose in waves, echoing beneath the transparent dome. When the speeches concluded, the crowd slowly dispersed to explore the excavation, leaving Lena and Jason a moment of relative solitude beneath the looming structure. She turned to him, recalling the countless hardships they'd overcome, her near-death experience, the political hurdles, the revelations of a lost history. All of it led here, to this triumphant bridging of two civilizations. A tear slid down her cheek, and she couldn't hide her trembling smile. Jason gently brushed the tear away. "Happy tears?" he asked, tone teasing but eyes warm. She laughed softly. "Yes, very happy. We've come so far." And, she paused, taking his hands in hers. "It's not just about our people's unity, is it? We've forged something personal, too." He caught his breath, scanning her face. "I've felt it since the day I found you in that storm," he admitted. "I just didn't have the words to say it." A swirl of dust danced around their feet, a remnant of the receding crimson storms that had once nearly claimed Lena's life. She stepped closer. I was afraid. My culture told me to fear you, to mistrust your kind. But all you ever gave me was kindness, and you opened my eyes to a greater truth. You're more than just my rescuer, Jason. You're my hope." His lips curved in a tender smile. "And you're mine, Lena. Finding you there changed something in me. I'm not the same pilot who once hopped from star to star. I feel a purpose now, a connection I never expected." She inhaled, heart fluttering. Then, as though drawn by an invisible force, they leaned in, their lips meeting in a gentle kiss. The hush of the newly stilled air enveloped them. The centuries of mistrust melted away in that moment, replaced by the promise of a new era. Together, they had dared to chart a course that defied old myths, forging a path for Vireen and humans alike. When they pulled apart, warmth radiated through her body. She saw her own hope reflected in his eyes. "Shall we," she whispered, "go see the rest of the ceremony? Or perhaps take a walk through the facility?" He laughed quietly. "I think the others can wait for a few minutes. Let's see if we can find more secrets in there, together." They strolled hand in hand into the labyrinthine corridors, weaving through the newly restored passageways. Soft lights illuminated inscriptions that once lay in darkness. Vireen and human scientists greeted them as they passed, smiling in recognition of what their alliance had wrought. Lena felt the throbbing pulse of history around her, a living tapestry of the past, present, and future entwined. In a remote corner of the complex, they found a vantage point overlooking a wide subterranean chamber. The floor below housed ongoing excavation, with workers carefully brushing dust from a mosaic embedded in the tiles. The mosaic depicted a stylized starship crossing an arch of starlight, flanked by figures reminiscent of both human and Vireen design. Lena leaned over the railing, enthralled. "If only we knew more about that original joint mission," she murmured. "I wonder what they were trying to accomplish." Jason's expression turned thoughtful. "From what we've pieced together, It might have been a research station, a stepping stone for deeper exploration of the sector. Maybe they found something so monumental, it brought them together, until something tore them apart. He sighed. We may never have all the details. She nodded, then turned to place a hand on his chest. But we can make sure what they started doesn't remain buried. We can keep their dream alive. He covered her hand with his own. Agreed. A comfortable silence stretched, the hum of excavation reverberating softly in the background. Lena's mind drifted, remembering the swirling crimson storm that had nearly ended her life, thinking of how improbable it was that a human would appear at the last moment and save her. An ancient fate, or mere coincidence? Perhaps it was both. One small act of rescue had ignited a cascade of revelations that shook two civilizations. And in the eye of that cosmic storm, she found an anchor in him. 3 months later, Lena and Jason took a shuttle up to Earth's starport. The Vireen Council had officially sanctioned a goodwill tour, allowing Lena to speak before the Interstellar Alliance as an advocate for improved relations. She was anxious, but the supportive presence of Jason eased her nerves. Their approach to Earth, a vibrant sphere swirled with blue and green, was as much of a marvel to Lena as Vireen Prime had been to Jason. The planet's arrays of orbital stations glittered, a testament to humanity's technological prowess. As they descended, the continents and oceans spread out like a living tapestry. Soon, they landed at a floating platform that soared above a futuristic city teeming with life. Diplomats greeted them warmly. News outlets thronged around to capture the story of the Vireen scholar and the human pilot, whose cooperation sparked a new era. Lena felt a pang of shyness, not accustomed to so many stares and flashing cameras. Jason guided her with a protective arm. She could sense his pride, and she found reassurance in his calm presence. Over the following weeks, she addressed Earth's Council of Nations, sharing the story of the lost Jindara facility, the hidden alliance, and the impetus to collaborate anew. Politicians, scientists, and ordinary citizens listened raptly, some with wide eyes at the notion that the Vireen, long considered aloof, were now ready to open dialogue. Many approached Lena privately, expressing astonishment and delight at her courage. Meanwhile, Jason conducted training exercises with Earth's rescue teams, inviting Vireen observers. The synergy between the two sides, once considered impossible, became more tangible. Lena watched from a vantage point, heart swelling with pride. Each time Jason emerged from a demonstration, he winked at her, as if to say, "Look how far we've come." In the evenings, they found moments to slip away from the bustle, exploring Earth's cultural wonders, its music halls, art exhibitions, and grand libraries. Under the glow of neon-lit streets, they would stroll, exchanging stories of their childhoods, bridging the gulf of differences with a shared desire to understand. Lena's laughter often spilled out freely, surprising her at how natural it felt to be so at ease among humans. She realized that so many of her preconceived fears had no real basis anymore. One crisp night, while gazing upon Earth's cityscape from a quiet rooftop garden, Lena turned to Jason with a contemplative look. "I never dared to dream any of this," she said softly, the wind combing through her hair. "For so long, we built walls. And now, I'm standing here. And it's like, once I shed the fear, I realized how much world there is to see." He slipped an arm around her. "I felt the same way when I first stepped onto Vireen Prime," he confessed. "I'd heard you were distant, distrusting. But you, Lena, you shattered all those stereotypes." She smiled, pressing her cheek to his shoulder. "Do you think, in time, we'll truly heal the centuries of wounds between our peoples?" He let out a gentle sigh. "Time is key. But if they can see what we see, if they can see us standing together, then yes. I believe it." Her eyes glowed with an inner light. "Then let's do it. Let's show them. Not just in official speeches and expeditions, but in how we live. Let's prove that a Vireen can trust a human with her life and her heart." His response was to tilt her chin upward, capturing her lips in a soft, lingering kiss. The city lights sparkled beneath them, a silent chorus celebrating their union. When they pulled apart, the truth in their gazes was undeniable. They had defied old myths, forged a path from fear to understanding, and in so doing, discovered that the greatest secret of all was not just the shared history, but the infinite potential of what could be built upon it. Epilogue: A Happy Dawn. Years after that fateful day on Jindara Moon, the storm-blasted deserts and swirling red skies remained, but the vantage on the horizon had shifted. A joint Vireen human research colony dotted the landscape with shining domes and energy spires, each built from a blend of architectural styles. Team members walked the corridors, half Vireen, half human, sometimes both at once, a testament to unprecedented cooperation. In the largest dome, an advanced museum told the story of the ancient alliance, the conflict, and the rediscovery. Visitors from both worlds and beyond wandered exhibits showcasing relics, data modules, and reconstructed scenes of the once-lost era. At the entrance stood a new statue, a replica of the locket discovered by Lena and Jason, depicting the Vireen and human figures in unity. A small plaque read, "In memory of hope reclaimed." And in a quiet laboratory nearby, Lena and Jason oversaw a new project, analyzing the deeper layers beneath Jindara's crust, searching for any additional secrets left by their ancestors. Their team included young Vireen and humans eager to learn from the synergy of minds. Lena, her hair now worn in a style blending both cultures, meticulously cataloged each finding, while Jason, looking just as focused, helped calibrate scanning drones. Every so often, the two would exchange a glance, a reminder of how far they had traveled together, literally and metaphorically. And at the end of each day, they would return to a cozy quarters they shared, where the walls displayed images from both homeworlds, teal forests of Verena Prime beside Earth's expansive seas. They spent their evenings weaving stories for the next generation, whether they were Vireen, human, or other species who had joined the growing circle of allies. One particularly serene morning, as the domed shield parted to allow filtered sunlight onto the sands, Lena stood at a vantage point, gazing at the swirl of red dust that once spelled her doom. Jason found her there, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked softly. She leaned into him, recalling that desperate moment of oxygen loss, her terror replaced by the arrival of a human savior. "I used to think it was terrifying," she whispered, "but now, all I can see is the promise of discovery. And it led me to you." He pressed a light kiss to her temple. "Sometimes fear hides the best surprises," he remarked. "If not for that storm, we never would have met." She smiled, nestling closer. "And our people might never have discovered the truth." Below, a research transport glided across the dunes, carrying both Vireen and human explorers to an excavation site. Above, the battered heavens began to lighten, the morning sun chasing away the crimson twilight. In that shifting dance of shadow and light, Lena felt a profound joy. The centuries of separation had ended. The knowledge once buried had sparked an alliance that defied old myths. And through it all, she, who once feared the ruthless human, had found the greatest gift, love that bridged both worlds. A final gust of wind swept around them, a gentle echo of the chaos that once was. Lena looked up at Jason, her pulse humming with contentment. "Shall we go?" she asked softly, nodding toward the transport. "A new section is waiting for us to explore." He grinned, taking her hand. "Let's do it," he said, his voice full of warmth. Together. And so they walked side by side across the threshold, out into the open sands of Jindara, hearts filled with a hope that shone brighter than any storm. A testament to the power of understanding, courage, and the undeniable truth that the greatest discoveries are not only about ancient histories, but about each other. They set off hand in hand, forging a future that, this time, promised a truly happy ending for both the Vireen and humanity, united at last. 01.